He has been working as a software engineer for 15 years or so, and he's very interested in aviation. And his talk will present an interesting idea about transferring technology, or transferring a concept from the internet to the physical world. Please welcome on the stage Erik Unger. Thank you.
So yeah, I will be talking about drones and the Internet of Things. So yeah, drones are things too, and most of them are online, so I think that's fitting. I'll give a short introduction. Most of the talk will be drones in general, what areas they are used, and in the end I will also present what we are doing at Spacely. So yeah, but the roots, I think everybody knows the military background of drones. That's what they have been used for the last 15 years or so. The US pioneering bombing Afghanistan back into the Stone Age. That's the typical drone people have been thinking about for the last 10 years. What you can see here in the image, the copter is from Schiebel, so we also have in Austria one company who is doing that kind of drones. They're not necessarily bombing, but they, their customers are governments and big oil companies and that kind of stuff. So they are in this market, in this top-down market. What we're seeing with drones is basically this top-down government contract companies, big companies who are working like those big aerospace companies, and that's the top-down approach. And what we're also seeing is the bottom-up approach, which is the typical maker movement: get some cheap parts from China, build stuff, when it flies, you hate it. And that's the later kind of drone company that also we are building. So yeah, probably all of you know the current today consumer drones. It's basically a quadrocopter with a camera under it. That's the really big application. They're selling millions of those. It's really bigger than even I have anticipated. Because they're getting idiot-proof and everybody can fly them. Of course, real idiots are also flying them into landing paths of airports and stuff like that. And that's the future tomorrow, which is basically today. Those drones are getting smaller and smaller. You can get them now in size of like that for $15 from China. And they're getting smaller and smaller, and you probably can even wear them around your wrist. And and the thing that's the big thing now is the droney, so that's the selfie from a drone. That seems to be a really big market. So in fall of last year, there have been 3 startups coming out with that idea. So you have this drone following you, and you're doing some cool, whatever, surfing, and it's filming you. And there have been 3 startups presenting the same thing, these droney videos, within 3 days. And that seems to be the really big consumer thing, droney. Oh yeah, it's moving. And there's also another side. That's the kind of nerdy side, that's us building planes. And what you see here is those goggles we're wearing. So we put in cameras onto our planes, and we can see the perspective from the first-person view from the plane, like we would be flying ourselves. And that's also now really big in hobby flying, and it's kind of sports. Nerd sports flying. And I'll show you a video. So this FPV flying, and especially FPV racing, is really big now in some small nerd areas. And you may recognize that kind of flying from Star Wars. So it's basically like a video game, but for real, with real hardware. You're really flying through the woods. And of course, if you really crash, something is really to repair. Some people say, so why should I? Yeah, why shouldn't I use? Why should I fly like that? Because in a video game I can just reset it and start from new, and it's always working well. But we nerds think it's awesome to fly really through the woods like that. And there's also Arc. So this is from the Ars Electronica Center in Linz. You probably have seen that. So it's a lot of drones with lights. And they perform a show. So yeah, that's really Internet of Things, because all of those things are online and they're offline. I don't know how many UFO sighting reports they got for that. Okay, so yeah, air images are the really big thing, the big application. So you have that, as we've seen before, for hobby photography, for the drones, also of course for professional film productions. So before you had a manned helicopter, now you have a drone that just costs a few % of what a manned helicopter costs. You have that of course for live video from sporting events. It's also used, of course, for security, like the big military drones, but for smaller applications. You can also use it to inspect infrastructure, which is actually a quite big area, and also for mapping, so geo-information systems, getting images from above, creating maps and big data out of that. So yeah, for these infrastructure inspections, it's a really big thing for pipelines. So usually manned helicopters or manned planes have been used for inspecting pipelines. It's really important to do that. Something more modern, of course, also wind turbines have to be inspected if they have any cracks on them or something going wrong. And also one interesting area is having a look at building lots, so how much material you're using for the building, what's the progress, how many stories you've got, what cars and trucks are at your building site. Yeah, the mapping thing, so one big sub branch of that is creating 3D images. So if you create 3D images, of course everybody knows the Google Maps stuff, but you can also use that to calculate volumes, so volumes of maybe hang slides, or on the building lot how much material you have used, something like that. And another big application is agriculture. So here the big keyword is precision agriculture. So basically taking a more intelligent approach. So you don't just spray everything with tons of insecticides. You're having a look and you're just applying the stuff where you really need it. And yeah, there's some numbers. With precision agriculture, you get about 20 to 30% better yield, which is really big numbers if you apply it to all of agriculture. Here is a possible combination with ground robots. So you won't use your drones for tons of crops or spraying stuff. What the Americans are doing, they already have completely robotic tractors that are doing all the work. And here you can combine the data from the drones with the robotic tractors doing all the work. And of course, yeah, building big data models together with ground sensors. Here again, a lot of Internet of Things stuff, because all those sensors have to be combined and online. Another area is wildlife and environment protection. So yeah, preventing poaching is one thing. Document illegal logging, document on sea oil spills and ships dumping waste, and building big data models for environment and climate modeling. Another area a little bit related to that is disaster relief. Here again, mapping is important. Where happened what? Was the big landslide? How much of the buildings are damaged after an earthquake? Stuff like that. It's also about emergency response, so bringing things to the people who need something, like water or communication devices, medical supplies, but also important to document everything that's going on in civilized areas where we have insurance for the insurance claims. Then of course search and rescue, transport, we've talked about that, and also very interesting building communications networks. So if you have a big disaster, you're using your communication abilities, and there to build some ad hoc Wi-Fi networks is really important. Yeah, so the Australians have a challenge where where they're delivering water to someone in the outback. It's called the Outback Challenge. I think they had it for 5 years or more. It's a well-known challenge for drones. And yeah, it's basically finding Joe Outback, that's the guy like here in the grass, and dropping some water. And the one who gets the water nearest to Joe wins. That's also an idea, bringing a defibrillator to some emergency, because over the air is just much faster than using roads. Yeah, that's a nice image that isn't working yet. And also another idea is flying those lifesaver rings out to people who are drowning. Of course, that's much, much faster than swimming to them. And that's something we're working on. Maybe not only bringing the lifesavers out there, but bringing complete people back in when they're drowning, or they're on a ship that's sinking, or on a building that's burning. So we're working on a concept where we can transport one person with an electrical copter. Yeah, and then communication networks, again for disaster areas, but also for areas where you don't have those kind of infrastructure. Google is working on it, obviously. Facebook is also working on it. So Google is working on blinks. Facebook is working or has bought a company who's building such planes. They're working with solar panels, and the idea here is to fly really high so that you're above any air traffic over 60,000 feet, and use the sun at daylight to get some altitude, and then when it's dark you glide down a little bit and you get yeah, energy early enough so you don't have to land in the beginning of the next day. And the word for that is atmospherical satellites, because it's kind of like a satellite. It's always there, it's never landing, but it's in the atmosphere. And yeah, there are quite some teams working on that, because it's really big, because you could replace some communication satellites with that. And those satellites, the cost for those satellites are in the billions, and those things, those planes are in the millions, so it's much cheaper. And for instance, also Airbus is working on that, and what you can see here is one of the prototypes from Airbus. So yeah, what you can see, it's really light, it's really slow, and it has to fly above all the thunderstorms and everything because it couldn't stand them. Okay, then also one idea, it has been just an idea for now, is construction work. So what if you use drones to fly stuff around and build structures with it? And yeah, there are research groups working on that. Quite interesting, but yeah, would you build real buildings with that? Well, I don't know. Not yet, at least. And yeah, now to my final point, the physical Internet of Things. So that's the thing we're working on. It's transporting real things from hub to hub, or from node to node, like the Internet is working. You're putting a packet into one node and it finds its way around other nodes and comes out wherever the destination address is. And that's what we as a startup, Spaceleap, are working on. And yeah, it's another take on the Internet of Things. It's the real Internet for things. So that's our development drone that's delivering packets. You can see on the belly of the thing. And let's accelerate that. It's landing in a base station, and what we want to build is a network of those base stations, and drones fly from base station to base station, recharge or get the battery swapped there, and yeah, you put the packet into one side of the network and it comes out on the other side. And what you could build with that, if you're looking at areas that don't have that kind of transport infrastructure that we have, like of Africa, you could build a network there and maybe help them to make a jump over yeah, those infrastructure phases like road building, like they have with mobile phones. And that's it. Thanks.
Any questions?
What's the current state of drones flying information? So I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
No, it's not a problem at all. It's a problem of positioning. Maybe you're referring to swarm behavior, something like that. So yeah, just stat information flying isn't a problem, but swarm behavior, you would need that if you have real swarms. But currently we don't have so many drones that we have really swarms of them. But one area where you could think about that is like if you're flying in the thermic upcurrents, like over Africa, then drones could speak to each other and like the birds say, oh, here is some updraft, like, oh, fly over there, get some altitude. And that would be a way to stay in the air and, for instance, build a communication network that way. If you wouldn't be flying in 60,000 feet like the big guys.
Any more questions? Any more questions?
Maybe one. It's maybe also a little bit far in the future. So companies like Amazon working with drones, I think also in Germany the packet service is working with drones. Can we see the situation that we have too many drones?
No, so of course there are many startups working on just that. There are not that many really serious ones. The one with DHL, it's more like a marketing gag, so they did one flight, or 2 flights actually. And yeah, now they're saying, okay, we are testing this and this, and so currently Switzerland, the Swiss Post has been testing this. The Germans did it and the French, and we are in talks with the Austrian Post. But that's not real service, that's not an automated system where you put a packet in and it comes out at the other side. It's more like RC model flying, where you put the model there, you plug it in and activate your transceiver and everything. It's not a completely automated system. Amazon is really working on that automated systems, but they will be using it for their internal network, and yeah, there's a world outside of Amazon, and that's our market.
What are the most challenging questions you face right now as a startup with drones?
The most challenging questions, of course, like every startup, it's like funding and getting the first prototypes working and all this stuff. For us, it's putting together all the different parts, so we're not depending on one research area where some critical part has to be solved. Basically, most of the parts are there in theory, and we have to innovate and combine everything that's there to implement that completely automated service. So there's not one big thing we're waiting on, so we need that innovation. It's basically everything there, it's just combining and doing it.
Any more questions?
Hi, Jan. You mentioned your market object. This is the only market which you focus on?
Sorry?
You mentioned the market, your market, the customers, or the market, or the areas. You mentioned Africa. This is the only one?
Yeah, so our main problem is that autonomous transport is not allowed in the EU and in the US now. It may take some years until the regulations are there. We can't say when it's there, but we know that the service of transportation is needed desperately in developing countries, and we know that we can solve that problem there. And so our market will be maybe in combination with NGOs who have big budgets and where we can help to solve their problems and fulfill their mission. And we're positive that we can work with them and earn some money that way. Because of course, the question is, if you're going into developing countries, third world countries, the usual argument is people don't have money there, so why would they buy your stuff?
Okay, if you push away the regulation, which segment do you want to focus?
Sorry?
If you push away the regulation in the EU and US, okay? Which segment do you want to focus?
Which segment do you want to focus on?
Because you present the drones, okay? Who need it? I mean,
who needs the drones?
Yeah, for the delivery in the EU.
Basically everyone who wants to transport something fast and very flexible. So we can't replace the truck, the railway, where tons are transported, but we can be very fast, very direct, and help with real-time delivery. So if you're looking at infrastructure for deliveries, it's all moving in the direction of getting what I want now. And many small parts compared to getting one big truck.
Where can I get the tickets, or where can I subscribe to the Star Wars Real Games?
There is, look for FPV, first person view, racing in Austria. There will be most probably in June one big event, probably in Linz, where international top pilots come together and do some racing through pylons like Red Bull Air Race, but for small.
Okay, where can I do a license? Where can I get a license from?
You don't need a license if you are just flying for fun. Actually, so you can fly if the reason for flying is the flight itself. So if you're making air images, that's not flying for the reason of flight itself, that's flying for air images. Then you have to get a certification for UAV class 1. But if you're just using your goggles and getting your images and just flying for the fun of it, you can do it like RC pilot. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Let's have a big round of applause. And the 10 minutes break.